Hi, I'm Bob, and for those of you who've noted that we've been having microphone difficulties on the show, they should be fixed in the next couple of episodes, so until then, I don't know, fucking deal with it. Was anybody asking for a new Tarzan movie? I mean, I know they've got to use every name brand property we've got now, and at least they've already done like 5,000 Tarzan movies, so this kind of makes more sense than the Play-Doh movie, or the Emoji movie, or a movie of fucking Tetris, but I mean, I'm a guy who really likes Tarzan movies, and even I didn't ask for a new Tarzan movie. But whatever, now we've got one. So, Tarzan has the same basic problem in terms of modern adaptation as just about every other turn-of-the-century pulp adventure property, i.e. everything else Edgar Wright Burroughs wrote, H.P. Lovecraft, the Conan stories, in that they're not really explicitly racist or problematic or whatever. I mean, okay, sometimes Lovecraft kind of seemed to be going for like the Olympic gold medal in racism, but the other stuff, not so much all the time. But a lot of it was grounded in what were for the time very common assumptions and misconceptions of the world that make them really uncomfortable now, especially since we know a lot more about the stuff that was supposed to be mysterious or exotic and now just kind of reads as, I don't know, just, yeah, uncomfortable. What I mean is the big idea stuff in Tarzan is awesome. Doesn't it sound cool to be a crazy wild man who's got jungle powers because he was raised by apes and can talk to animals and shit? Fuck yeah, it does. That's why they've made 100 fucking Tarzan movies. But then you think on it and the whole, wow, a human who lives in the African jungle? How extraordinary, kind of thing. And then it's like, wait a minute, aren't there already humans living in Africa? So what is that? Oh. And then you got the whole other thing happening where he's also like the heir to a long-lost British lordship, so it's like, oh, I guess if you drop some blue-blooded European noble someplace, even if he has no idea who he is, he'll naturally just become the lord of wherever it is, because that's just how nature works, and that's kind of uncomfortable. And then you remember that this was the exact period when Europe was deciding how they were going to divide up and plunder the shit out of the actual Africa, and yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, aw man, all I wanted to do was see some monkeys and maybe half-naked Maureen O'Sullivan, and now I'm just depressed. Now, to me, it seems like the easy way out of this would be to just lean into the fantasy aspect of it. I mean, in the books, Tarzan gets involved with all kinds of mysticism and monsters and other crazy shit. You could probably just focus a whole movie on that and leave the really uncomfortable stuff for the margins. Or hell, just bump the timeline up and give them some Nazis to punch. I mean, they did that in a couple of the old movies and it worked well, plus it was how they got everyone to ignore the fact that Indiana Jones is basically a grave robber. And also maybe a sexual predator if you do the math on Marion Ravenwood. Whatever. Anyway, Warner Brothers' The Legend of Tarzan, on the other hand, decides that the best way around the problems of making a new Tarzan movie, short of, not making a new Tarzan movie, is to take all the most uncomfortable, bordering on racist shit about Tarzan, put it all up front and center, and then spend the whole movie apologizing for it. As though someone at Warner Brothers is convinced that this could be a fucking Avengers-level endless franchise if they just devote the whole first movie to insisting how not racist they are. Even as most of the audience, for better or worse, is probably looking at it going, dude, I never even noticed that shit if you hadn't brought it up all the time. But okay, the idea here is that Legend of Tarzan is kind of a pseudo-sequel to most of the previous Tarzan mythology. He's already met Jane, he's already discovered his true heritage and moved back to England as a celebrity because, super jacked rich dude with monkey powers, people are going to pay attention to that. But then Samuel L. Jackson shows up as real-life Civil War veteran and global anti-slavery crusader George Washington Williams. Yeah, the other big idea here is to put Tarzan in the middle of actual historical stuff, which goes about as well as you can expect. You see, Williams wants Tarzan to be his guide on a fact-finding mission to the Belgian Congo to prove that King Leopold is oppressing the natives and reinstituting the slave trade. Boy, I can't imagine how this movie's gonna go wrong. Margot Robbie as Jane insists on tagging along because she grew up in Africa and misses it, because, hey, so long as we're making everybody super uncomfortable, let's make sure that the hottest, whitest, hot white chick we can find plays the character whose main function is vocally pining for her motherland of Africa. Yikes. She also gets kidnapped right away, but she's not a damsel in distress because she says explicitly that she's not a damsel in distress. Alright? I mean, she still really does nothing but get kidnapped, so whatever. Everything is actually being orchestrated by Christoph Waltz as Leon Rom, another real-life person, though nowhere near as evil in the movie as he was in real life. The guy in charge of fucking up the Congo for King Leopold is part of some overcomplicated bullshit plot involving diamonds and a mercenary army and fucking Jaimin Hansu as Tarzan's old enemy, and I think also the ape family that raised Tarzan but now hates him for some reason. It's all just an excuse for a bunch of generic let's go rescue Jane action chase stuff, interrupted by scenes of enslaved Africans or animal poaching or ecological destruction, where the camera keeps cutting back to Tarzan making a pouty face in case anyone in the audience was on the fence about slavery being a very, very bad thing. There's also a bunch of origin story flashback stuff to Tarzan's backstory, which I can't really imagine makes any fucking sense unless you already know Tarzan's backstory. I guess they kind of figured that enough kids had the Disney version on VHS, so that's okay. I guess all of this might be salvageable if any of it was fun, but tonally we're still very much in Warner Brothers' signature gritty reboot land, so everything is washed out and drab and unpleasant looking. I mean, the African Congo is one of the most naturally beautiful locations on the planet. It's almost like they had to try to make the movie look like shit. Nobody seems to be having a good time, there's no indication we're supposed to be having a good time, none of the actors bring any particular appeal to their characters, save for Robbie, who's a fucking charisma machine. Alexander Skarsgård as Tarzan remains a black hole of personality whose lack of screen presence almost feels like a deliberate joke when contrasted with his size and physique. He's like the Bizarro World Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Poor Jackson and Waltz look like they're both checking their watches in between takes, wondering when Quentin's going to be done with the next script. The only places where any of this dreary bullshit comes to life are these really out-of-place, weird gonzo moments where it almost feels like the screenwriters were putting deliberately stupid shit in the movie just to see if the producers were actually reading the scripts. Like Tarzan has freaky mutant knuckles from walking on his hands as a kid, but it didn't seem to affect any other part of his body, so that's kind of dumb. There's an extended joke about gorilla nut licking from Samuel L. Jackson that the movie seems to think is the funniest thing ever. And speaking of humor, there's a throwaway line of dialogue implying that Rom is crazy because he was molested by a priest as a kid, which the movie seems to think is either hilarious or some kind of character building way to weaken his villainy. I don't know. I mean, of all the places to go, what the fuck is up with that? And this was supposed to be Warner Brothers' big 4th of July movie. Yeah, good fucking luck with that. But, you know, whatever. Everyone's just gonna go see Finding Dory again anyway, and I recommend you do the same fucking thing.